Hello and welcome to Cooking the Books with Heather. Today we are going to be making another shrimp and grits recipe. Today is going to be Creole shrimp and grits from Tanya Holland's Brown Sugar Kitchen cookbook. And we're going to start right away with making the Creole spice mix. This is separate from this recipe, but it's used throughout the book, but it's super simple, so we're just going to include it here. So we're gonna just mix everything in a bowl and it'll be ready, and you can keep this for 6 months, she says, in a airtight container. So I have kosher salt. I've already pre-measured everything. I have herb de Provence, which is a mix of like rosemary and savory and a bunch of other herbs. I have ground cumin. I have some cayenne pepper. This is quite a lot of cayenne pepper. Mine is not as red as I was expecting, but that's okay. I have an awful lot of freshly ground black pepper. I started with my regular grinder and ended up just pulling out a coffee grinder that we keep for spices. So we're using that. And then the last thing we have is sweet paprika. So this is not smoked paprika, not a hot paprika, just regular old, usually just says paprika, which is sweet paprika. And we're gonna mix it up. And there we go, Creole spice mix. We're gonna use a little bit of it for this recipe, and the rest I'll probably just put in a Ziploc bag and store it in my cupboard, like I do with everything. Let's see, and our next, I think the rest we have to move to the stove for. This is basically still 3 more recipes in one. So there's white cheddar grits that we are gonna start probably first, just because they're gonna take a little while and can hold, and then a Creole sauce that we're gonna use with our shrimp. So we'll meet you back at the stove in just a minute. Okay, we're ready to start our white cheddar grits. So I have water coming to a boil. It's already mostly boiling, so I'm ready to add my grits. Now she says to use a quick cooking grits. I didn't have any on hand. Apparently I did very poorly shopping and making sure I had everything on hand in the right amounts for this recipe. That's okay. But I have old fashioned, and that's okay. I just might have to add some extra water at the end. They tend to cook about the same in my opinion, but. So I'm going to add the measured grits here, and then we're going to whisk this in and take it down to a simmer. And I'm supposed to cook this, whisking constantly until they're like a mush for about 4 minutes. I think mine are gonna take a little bit longer to cook than that, but we're gonna try 4 minutes and see where we are. The good thing about this is they will hold, so I will, when I'm ready to continue with the recipe, I'll just put a lid on this, and then when I am ready to serve, I'll check the thickness, add some water if I think it needs it, and whisk it up, and it'll be fine. Grits do not get mushy, not in my experience, and I will leave them sitting on the stove for half an hour, more than that, while I make breakfast. I start them first, and then they just sit until I'm ready for them. It's been about 4 minutes. Mine's not gonna be done in that amount of time, just because I have a longer cooking grit. So what I'm gonna do is what I usually do, is I'm gonna put the lid on this, I'm gonna put it on really low heat and just sit it back there while I continue with the other part of the recipe. So I've got my grits on the back burner, pretty low, not as low as it'll go, but definitely kind of low. I'm gonna check it occasionally and give it a whisk. And when it's about done, we'll fix it, add the rest of the ingredients. But now we're gonna make our Creole sauce. So I need a little bit of unsalted butter. I've got this pan on a low-ish heat. And we're gonna melt the butter in the saucepan. I've got a relatively shallow saucepan because it's not gonna be a lot of ingredients in here. So it'll be fine, and shallow will help the liquid sort of boil and thicken, which is what we are gonna need. My butter is melted in my saucepan, and I'm gonna add, in here I have some green onions, just the white parts chopped. So I almost minced them, not as tiny as I normally would do garlic, which is also what's in here. And that's a little bit of minced garlic. And we're gonna cook these in the butter for about, I don't know, 4 or 5 minutes. Let me see. Yep, about 5 minutes, until they're softened, and just on the low heat is fine for right now. Okay, it's been about 5 minutes and my garlic is starting to get brown, and I don't want that to happen. So I'm gonna go ahead and add some beer. Now this is, she says a Belgian wheat beer. Belgian? Yeah, wheat beer, doesn't say Belgian, but like Hefeweizen. So I found a local Belgian style wheat beer. It has coriander and curacao orange peel. I don't know. It's what I picked that I could buy 1 bottle of because it's not one of our favorites, or one of our favorite styles. And then this is another part where I did not plan very well. We need quite a lot of Worcestershire sauce. So I have about 3/4 of what she calls for in this recipe, and I'm adding to that. I looked up what some good substitutes for Worcestershire sauce are, and the top 2 were balsamic vinegar and soy sauce plus sugar. I decided not to add the sugar, but I've got sort of a 50-50 mix of balsamic vinegar and soy sauce in here, so hopefully it'll be okay. You know, didn't figure out I didn't have enough until I started measuring it right before I was gonna make it. So if that's not quite right, that'll be on me. It'll be a little different than what she intends, but you know. And now we're gonna bring this to a boil, reduce it to a simmer, and we're going to reduce this liquid until it's thick and syrupy and we have about a cup. So that's what we're doing right now. Okay, so my grits have been cooking for a really long time now, just on pretty low heat. They're a little bit thick for me, but I'm gonna wait to see if I should add some water until I'm done adding the rest of the ingredients. So my sauce is still reducing. I just sort of moved that to the back burner. It takes 15 to 20 minutes. So I'm just gonna finish up my grits, and then they will sit on the lowest heat you can until you're ready. So I'm gonna add some heavy cream, just a little bit. So these will be much less dairy heavy than the ones that we made from deep run roots, which were cooked entirely in milk. We have some unsalted butter. We have some salt. Grits need quite a bit of salt. So I'll be tasting this before I serve it to see if I need to add more. And I'm going to get these things incorporating. There we go. And now I'm going to add the white cheddar. So I just have some white cheddar that I've grated and pre-measured by weight and then grated. So there we go. And that's another reason why I want to wait until we're just about done and the cheese is all melted, because the cheese will add a little bit of salt to the grits as well. There we go. That is actually a pretty good serving consistency for me. It's not lumpy, it's not too thick, it's not too thin, But I will, since it'll have to sit here for a little while our sauce reduces and we cook our shrimp, I will check it again before I serve it. But I'm just gonna put the lid back on and let it sit here until we are just about ready to serve. I just wanted to show you guys what my sauce looks like. Now that it's reduced, you can see the, when I drag the spatula over it, you kind of can see the pan for a little bit before it covers it up again. It's not super syrupy, but it's definitely thicker than it used to be. So I'm gonna measure the amount that I need for the shrimp. So I've got just some neutral vegetable oil heating up in a large skillet over medium heat until it shimmers. Turn my heat up a little bit because I was getting impatient. But our oil is starting to get kind of shimmery a little bit. Yeah, I can see it if I look at it just right. I'm gonna go ahead and put in some red bell peppers. Oh yeah, that's warm enough. Some green bell peppers. These are just diced, kind of small, but not minced. Some green onions. Now this is the whole green onion, white and green part. Just sliced. And then we have some garlic. And I think now we also add our Cajun Creole spice mix. Some of our Creole spice mix. I will have an awful lot of this left over. I'll figure out something to do with it. All right, we're just cooking this until the vegetables are soft, about 5 minutes. I think the vegetables are softened enough. I was not super paying attention to the time, but I don't want them super soft, I don't think, but I think it's about time to start adding our shrimp. So I'm gonna put them in sort of one by one. These are 2125 shrimp that have been peeled and deveined. 2125 just means that they're 21 to 25 in a pound. So I'm gonna start turning them over as I see that the top sides are starting to look kind of pink, because that means it's almost done. And that means we also don't need to make sure they are fully cooked at this point. It's a little bit fiddly for me just turning them once for this recipe. I probably wouldn't do it this way again, but try to follow it as closely as I can. So we're going to add our Creole sauce to this. I'm gonna add We're going to add some heavy cream. And we're going to add a little bit of unsalted butter. So we just want this sort of simmering. I'm going to mix all that stuff in. We need to add all of this baby spinach, thoroughly washed, ready to eat, especially since I'm going to be cooking it. I'm not going to bother washing it again. So I'm just going to put handfuls of this in here. And when this is all wilted, this is just about done. So I'm going to wilt some, add some, wilt some, add some. And when we're done, it'll all be wilted and ready to eat. Okay, I'm gonna call that shrimp wilted. It's pretty much there, and it will definitely be done by the time we plate everything up, because I'm just gonna turn this heat off, and we're gonna add a little bit of fresh squeezed lemon juice. And mix it up. There we go. There we go. That's a very thin sauce, but that's okay. Some people like sauce pretty thin. and it will go well with our grits, I think. All right, and then I do want to check my grits a little bit. They have not gotten too thick, so we're gonna call that good. I did have a little taste of them. Salt is good. I'm concerned about the salt level on the shrimp because the only salt that we put in here was with the Creole spice mix, but I think we'll be fine. And we're gonna plate up the shrimp, plate up the grits and put the shrimp on top, and we'll show you what it looks like. On this episode of Cooking the Books with Heather, you watched me make the Creole shrimp and grits from Tanya Holland's Brown Sugar Kitchen cookbook. And I have to say the grits were much more like I generally like them, although I usually cook mine with more milk and she just adds some cream at the end. They were still cream and cheese and butter at the end. That was much more the way I like them, and they were super easy. It's more the way I'm used to making grits, and that's just how you cook grits, right? So that was great. It did include several different components, so I had to go ahead and do the Creole spice mix, which is sort of a separate recipe and probably included elsewhere in this book. So now I have it and I won't have to make it again. And then you also have to make a Creole sauce, which was not too difficult. It just took a little while to reduce it. In fact, I think it took more than the 15 to 20 minutes that she said it should take for mine to reduce appropriately. And while I did not have quite as much Worcestershire sauce, and I substituted about a third of it with a combination of balsamic vinegar and soy sauce, half and half. It turned out really well. A lot of times vinegar in a sauce will just become a little bit overpowering, and it did not in this case. I think I could tell that it was there in a way that I wouldn't have been able to tell with the Worcestershire sauce. Like, it wouldn't be quite the same, but it was still really good, and it still did its job well, I think. And it was kind of surprised me that the Creole sauce doesn't have any spice in it, and that there's only a little bit of the spice mix that we made. Only like 2 teaspoons of that spice mix that we made goes into the shrimp part of the shrimp and grits. But I could feel sort of the heat of it just on the back of my throat. It was not spicy in my mouth. It did not make my mouth hurt, but it was sort of back of the throat heat. But it was not overpowering. The kids willingly ate it all. And my husband, in fact, really loved it. And I think he preferred this to our previous shrimp and grits recipe, surprisingly to me, because that was a little bit closer to what I thought he would like. But he really did enjoy these shrimp and grits, the shrimp mixture and the Creole sauce particularly, I believe. Even though it wasn't very spicy, he could tell, he said he could feel the spice, so he could tell that there was some spice in it. So that was good. However, I think I felt like my shrimp were just a little bit overcooked. And I think the method here where you sort of make the sauce and cook the shrimp and then you cook the shrimp and then you add the sauce and then you add the spinach to it. I was very glad to have vegetables in it, however. Must say, very glad there were vegetables in it. Green vegetables even, so I could feed my kids just this and not feel bad about it. Having it cooked that way where the shrimp continue to sort of cook in the sauce, I think mine got a little bit overcooked. Now, I'm not saying that when she does it, it gets overcooked, because obviously maybe I cooked my shrimp a little bit too long before I added everything else, but I think it just makes it easier to overcook the shrimp doing it this way. So comparing and contrasting, I think that the way that Vivian Howard does her shrimp and grits with gumbo sauce, where she makes the sauce, and then just sautés the shrimp and serves them on top. I think that that would improve this recipe a little bit for me. And it's, you know, if I'm looking for the best, which I'm not always, sometimes I'm just looking for something easy to do. But if I was looking for, you know, every ingredient being, you know, absolutely perfect in a way that I can cook it, I might cook my shrimp sort of separately and then add them to the sauce after I take it off of the heat. Anyway, that being said, we did all enjoy this recipe. The amount of grits were a little bit more appropriate for a four-person serving, in my opinion. And it didn't require any special ingredients, and it didn't feel like it took me forever. I think it took me a little over an hour with, you know, setting up everything and not being able to multitask like I might generally if we're not filming a recipe. So I think it was relatively easy, and I think anybody could put this together. And I hope you'll try it. And if you like it, please let me know in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed watching me make this, give me a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and come back and watch me make something else.